The white walls of Neural Observation Station Theta had no decoration, no color, nothing that might influence first contact protocols. Dr. Lyra Moss sat in the holding chamber, her tablet balanced on her knee, reviewing xenobiological data for the 100th time. 6 hours of waiting had tested everyone's patience, but she remained excited. This was what she had trained for her entire adult life. Across the room, Ambassador Quinn Halter paced in slow circles. His dress, shoes made soft clicking sounds against the polymer floor. He checked his watch again, frowned, and resumed pacing. Captain Roy Winters sat motionless in his chair, hands folded, eyes half closed. Military discipline made waiting easier for him. "How much longer do you think?" Lyra asked, breaking the silence. Halter shrugged. "Council protocols are thorough. They're probably scanning us for the 50th time. I hope the Wrath Key are worth the wait." Winters said without opening his eyes that Lyra's heart beat faster at the mention of their name. The Wrath Key. She had studied every available piece of information about them. A predator species that had conquered 6 other intelligent races on their home world before reaching space. Their reputation across the galaxy was fearsome. Other species lowered their eyes when Wrath Key warriors walked past. Trade negotiations with them were conducted through intermediaries because direct contact often ended in submission displays. And humanity was about to meet them face to face, above them, in the observation deck that the humans could not see. Council mediator Pollen watched through reinforced glass. His 6 eyes blinked in sequence as he made notes on a datapad. 73 first contacts in his career, and he had developed an instinct for how they would proceed. The humans seemed calm, which was unusual. Most species showed nervous behaviors before meeting the Wrath Key. "They don't know what's coming," his assistant said quietly to Pollen's tendrils curled with unease. "No, they don't." The door mechanism hummed, then slid open with a soft hiss. 3 figures entered the chamber, and the temperature seemed to drop 5 degrees. The Wrath Key moved like liquid shadow. Their scales caught the harsh light, shifting between deep green and black. 7 feet tall, powerfully built, with sensory tendrils extending from their heads like organic cables. High Tracker Shinvier led them, his yellow eyes scanning the room with predatory focus. Behind him came 2 younger warriors, Vintar and Keshare, their postures alert and ready. Lyra looked up from her tablet and froze, but not from fear. Her eyes widened with pure scientific fascination. They were magnificent. Every movement spoke of efficiency and power. The sensory tendrils twitched constantly, sampling the air. She had read about them, but seeing them in person was completely different. Halter stopped pacing. Winters opened his eyes and stood slowly, his military training evident in his careful, non-threatening movements. The 3 humans and 3 Wrath Key stood facing each other across 10 meters of empty floor. The Shinvier expected the humans to look away. Every species did. Even other predator species acknowledged Wrath Key dominance with averted gazes and smaller postures. But these 3 creatures stood upright, meeting his eyes directly. His sensory tendrils twitched with confusion. Were they ignorant of protocol or deliberately challenging him? Halter stepped forward half a pace, his hands visible and empty. "On behalf of humanity, we greet you with respect and hope for understanding between our peoples." The translation device on his collar converted his words into Galactic Standard. Shinvier understood the words, but something felt wrong. The human's body language did not match his polite speech. "No submission. No fear indicators. Just calm eye contact." Lyra set her tablet down on her chair. She stepped forward, moving past Halter without thinking, drawn by curiosity. She had so many questions. How did their sensory tendrils process chemical information? What was their homeworld's atmospheric composition? Did they have the same binocular vision structure as humans? At exactly 2:01 station time, according to the chronometer on the wall that Pollen was watching, Lyra looked directly at High Tracker Shinvier and smiled. It was a genuine expression, full of warmth and excitement. Her eyes crinkled at the corners. Her teeth showed in a broad, welcoming gesture. She took another half step forward, Eager to begin communication, in the observation deck, Pollen's 6 eyes widened in sequence. His data pad slipped from his grip and clattered on the floor. Down in the chamber, all 3 Rathki went absolutely still. Their sensory tendrils retracted against their skulls so fast it looked like a muscle spasm. Shenvier's pupils dilated to pinpoints. His breathing became rapid and shallow. Every muscle in his powerful body locked rigid. Beside him, Vintar made a small sound in his throat, something between a whimper and a growl. Keshare's claws extended involuntarily, scratching against her own palms as her fists clenched. They were frozen in a threat response so profound that their higher brain functions had temporarily shut down. The humans had no idea what had just happened, but Lyra's smile faded into confusion. "Hello," she said softly. "Are you all right?" Her voice seemed to break through something. Shenvier's breathing grew more ragged. Behind him, Vintar took one step backward toward the door. It was an unconscious movement, pure instinct overriding training and dignity. Winters recognized danger, even if he didn't understand it. His hand moved slowly to touch Halter's elbow, a silent signal. Something had gone terribly wrong. Halter raised one hand in what he thought was a calming gesture. The 3 Rathki flinched as if he had drawn a weapon. Halter froze, his hand still raised, suddenly aware that every movement might make things worse. "Nobody move," Winters said quietly. "Nobody speak." They stood in horrible silence, the humans confused and worried. The Rathki locked in a freeze response that went against every aspect of their warrior culture. Seconds stretched into minutes in the observation deck, Pollen grabbed his communicator with trembling tendrils. "Security, we have a situation. The Rathki have entered full threat freeze protocol." "What did the humans do?" the security officer asked. "Did they attack?" Pollen watched the frozen tableau below. The small human female who had smiled now looked concerned and worried. The male who had gestured was carefully lowering his hand. The third human stood very still, reading the room with impressive tactical awareness. "They did nothing," Pollen said, his voice tight with confusion he could not understand. One of them smiled. "They're just standing there." "But the Rathki—" He paused, searching for words. "The Rathki are terrified." Time moved like frozen syrup. Lyra watched the 3 Rathki warriors standing rigid before her and felt her scientific training battle with social instinct. Something about her behavior had triggered this response, but what? She had reviewed first contact protocols a dozen times. Smile to show friendliness. Maintain open body language. Express genuine interest. She had done everything right, and somehow everything had gone wrong. Winters spoke without moving his lips much, his voice barely above a whisper. "Halter, can you reach your communicator without moving your arms?" Voice activated, Halter murmured back. "But what do I tell them? We don't know what happened. Tell them we need a cultural advisor." Now, through the still air of the chamber, they heard one of the younger Rathki breathing too fast. Vintar's scales had shifted to a lighter shade of green. Something Lyra's research suggested indicated stress. His sensory tendrils remained flattened against his skull, completely retracted. In all the videos she had watched, she had never seen that before. High Tracker Shenvier stood at the center, and despite his frozen posture, Lyra could see him fighting for control. His eyes remained locked on her, and in their yellow depths, she saw something that made her stomach twist with guilt. Fear. Pure, animal fear. She had done this to him. Somehow, without meaning to, without understanding how, she had terrified a warrior from the most feared predator species in known space. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I don't know what I did, but I'm sorry." Her words seemed to reach Shenvier. His throat worked as he tried to speak. When his voice finally came, it was rough, strained, nothing like the smooth tone she had heard in recorded Rathki communications. "What are you?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Lyra blinked, confused. "We're humans. From Earth. We sent all the information through the Council databases. Our biology, our culture, our history." "No," Shenvier forced out. His muscles trembled with the effort of staying still instead of running. "Were you really?" Beside him, Vintar's nerve finally broke. He took another step backward, then another. His training as a scout, all his discipline as a warrior, meant nothing against the instinct screaming at him to get away from the small bipedal creature who had shown her teeth and looked him in the eyes. That Keshare made a low sound, a clicking in her throat that Lyra's research identified as a Wrathkey distress call. The sound of a predator who had become prey in the observation deck. Council Mediator Pollen was speaking rapidly into 3 communicators at once. I need behavioral specialists. I need xenopsychologists. I need someone who can explain why the Wrathkey are having a fear response to humans. The Wrathkey don't have fear responses, one of his assistants said. That's their entire reputation. They're the ones who cause fear. I know what their reputation is, Pollen snapped. I'm watching them panic right now. Pull every database we have on human evolutionary history. There has to be something we missed. Down in the chamber, Halter was speaking into his collar communicator in careful, measured tones. This is Ambassador Halter. We need to pause first contact procedures. Something in our behavior has caused distress to the Wrathkey delegation, requesting immediate cultural consultation. The response came back within seconds. Pause confirmed. Mediator Pollen suggests separating both groups for a cooling period. Transport is being arranged. Understood, Halter said. Then, speaking directly to the Wrathkey, but still not moving, he continued in Galactic Standard. We mean no offense. We come in peace. If we have violated protocol, we apologize and ask for guidance. We will leave this chamber first to give you space. It was the right thing to say, but the words felt hollow. Lyra watched Shunvie's eyes and saw something shift there. Not relief, but a deeper confusion. The human was offering submission by leaving first, offering territory, offering safety. It was behavior that made no sense coming from what his instinct insisted was an apex predator. Walk backward, Winters instructed quietly. Slow, no sudden movements. The 3 humans began to move, stepping carefully backward toward the far door. Lyra kept her hands visible and low. She wanted to apologize again, wanted to explain, wanted to understand, but silence seemed safer. With each step they took away from the Wrathkey, she saw some of the terrible tension leave Shunvie's posture. When the humans had retreated 20 meters, the far door slid open. They backed through it, and it closed with a soft hiss. Only then, alone in the holding chamber, did the Wrathkey warriors break. Vintar collapsed to his knees, his breathing ragged. Keshare turned away, her claws raking against the wall, needing to tear something to release the adrenaline flooding her system. Shunvie remained standing, but his legs shook. He had faced death before many times. He had hunted creatures that could crack starship hulls with their appendages. He had led raids against enemy fortifications. He had never, in his entire life, felt what he had just experienced, terror. Pure, instinctive, bone-deep terror that had nothing to do with logic or training. The human female had bared her teeth. She had looked him directly in the eyes. She had moved toward him, and every cell in his predator's body had screamed the same message. Apex. 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 Not a threat to fight. Not prey to hunt. Something above him in the hierarchy of predation. Something that could end him without effort. His communicator crackled to life. The voice of Nest Mother Kivare, ancient and steady, speaking in their native tongue. Shunvie, I heard the emergency beacon. What happened? I encountered them, he said, his voice still rough. The humans, and? He tried to find words. You need to hear what I found in the archives, Kivare. The old ones, the extinct civilizations. I've been searching since the Council first told us about Earth. What did you find? Records from a Venar, from before they fell. They encountered a species like these humans. They called them Grinwalkers. Her voice grew heavy. Shunvie, our ancestors had a word for creatures like them. It translates roughly as endwalkers. The ones who walk at the end of all hunts. Shunvie looked at the door where the humans had disappeared. Small, soft-skinned, seemingly fragile, and absolutely terrifying in ways he was only beginning to understand. Send me everything you found, he said, because we just stood face to face with them, and they have no idea what they are. Dr. Lyra Moss sat in the human quarters, staring at her hands like they were weapons she hadn't known she was carrying. Ambassador Halter stood by the window looking out at the stars, his shoulders tight with tension. Captain Winters was already writing his report, his fingers moving across a data pad with mechanical precision. I smiled. Lyra said for the 15th time. I just smiled. That's supposed to be friendly. Universal body language for welcome and openness. Apparently not that universal. Winters replied without looking up. We need to figure out what triggered their response before we try again. If we try again, Halter added quietly, Earth Command is going to review this. First contact with one of the Council's most powerful military species, and we accidentally terrified them. That's not exactly the impression we wanted to make. Lyra pulled up her research files, scanning through Rathkey cultural data again. Nothing explained what had happened. Their species valued strength, directness, clear communication. She had tried to be direct and clear. Where had it gone wrong? A chime at the door interrupted her thoughts. Halter opened it to find Mediator Pollen standing there, his 6 eyes blinking in that unsettling sequence that humans still found difficult to watch. May I enter? Pollen asked. Of course, Halter said, stepping aside. Pollen moved into the room with the careful grace of his species. He carried a data tablet, and his tendrils curled and uncurled with what Lyra had learned to recognize as anxiety. I need to ask you some questions about Earth's evolutionary history. We provided complete databases, Winters said. Is there something specific you need? Yes, Pollen replied. I need to understand humanity's position in your planet's food chain. The 3 humans exchanged glances. Lyra spoke first. We're omnivores. We can eat almost anything. Plants, meat, a huge variety of foods. We're adaptable. But where did you rank among predators? Pollen pressed. Were you apex predators? Lyra thought carefully. That depends on how you define it. We weren't the strongest or fastest. Big cats, bears, wolves. Those were all more dangerous in direct confrontation. But we had advantages. We could make tools. We could throw weapons accurately. We could coordinate in groups. And we had stamina. Stamina. Pollen's tendrils tightened. Humans are persistent hunters, Lyra explained, slipping into lecture mode. Our ancestors would pick a prey animal and follow it. Not chase it, just follow. The prey would run away, rest, run again. But humans would keep walking. For hours. For days if necessary. Eventually, the prey would die from exhaustion and heat exhaustion, and the humans would still be walking. Pollen made a note on his tablet, and Lyra noticed his tendrils had gone very still. So you killed through relentlessness. In a way, yes, she said. But we also formed partnerships. We domesticated wolves into dogs. We befriended other species. We're social creatures. You befriended predators? Pollen asked. Sure, Winters said. Dogs, cats, horses, birds of prey. There are documented cases of humans forming bonds with bears, big cats, even dangerous reptiles. We seem to have an instinct for it. Pollen was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that made all 3 humans go still. The Rathkey are apex predators. They have been for 50,000 years. They conquered their homeworld by defeating every other predator species there. They reached the stars on a foundation of dominance and strength. They have never, in all their history, been prey. Until today, Lyra whispered, understanding dawning. When you smiled at High Tracker Shinbiye, Pollen continued, you showed your teeth. You made direct eye contact. You moved toward him without any submission signals. His predator instincts interpreted this as a threat display from something higher in the food chain. But I wasn't threatening him, Lyra protested. I was being friendly. Yes, Pollen agreed. That may be what makes it worse. Aboard the Rathkey vessel, Shunvier sat in a meditation chamber, trying to calm his racing heart. Nest Mother Kivare had sent him files, and he read them with growing unease. The VinAR records were fragmentary, recovered from dead data caches on abandoned stations. But what remained was enough. The VinAR had been a powerful species, predators who ruled a dozen systems. 3,000 years ago, they sent an expedition to a remote planet to survey its resources. They found a world teeming with life, including a bipedal mammalian species that fascinated and terrified them. The report described creatures that showed their teeth in expressions the VNAR could not interpret. Creatures that ran not fast, but forever. Creatures that turned other predators into companions. The VNAR observers watched these beings hunt by simply following prey until the prey collapsed. They watched them coordinate in groups with sophisticated communication. They watched them survive in every environment on their planet, from frozen wastes to burning deserts. The expedition leader made a recommendation that seemed insane to the VNAR leadership. Mark the system as forbidden and never return. When asked why, the leader wrote something that Shunva read 3 times to make sure he understood it correctly. If these Grin walkers ever reach the stars, every predator species will face a choice: submission or extinction. I recommend we choose submission now, while we still have the dignity of making it our own choice. The VNAR leadership rejected the recommendation. They called the expedition leader a coward. 200 years later, the VNAR civilization collapsed. The official records said it was due to internal conflict. But HFY had found unofficial records, personal journals, coded messages. The VNAR had gone back to that planet. They had tried to conquer it. They had failed. Shunva closed the file and looked at his reflection in the polished metal wall. A Rathki high tracker, trained warrior, seasoned hunter. And he was afraid of a small human who had smiled at him. His communicator chimed. Mediator Pollen's voice came through. High tracker Shunva, the council is requesting your presence. We need to decide how to proceed. Has the council made a decision about humanity? Shunva asked. Not yet, Pollen replied. That's why we need you. You're the only one who has stood face to face with them. The council needs to know, are humans a threat? Shunva thought about Lyra's expression when she realized she had frightened them. The genuine concern and apology in her eyes. The way the humans had backed away, offering space and safety. Yes, he said finally, they're a threat, but not in the way the council thinks. The transport shuttle descended through pink clouds toward the moon's surface. Testing ground Zephyr 7 had been chosen specifically for its Earth-like conditions: breathable atmosphere, moderate temperature, diverse ecosystem. Through the viewport, Lyra could see forests and rivers stretching to the horizon. It looked peaceful, almost inviting. Are you sure this is a good idea? Ambassador Halter asked Captain Winters for the 3rd time. No, Winters replied honestly. But staying in sterile rooms clearly didn't work. Maybe a natural environment will help both sides relax. Lyra pressed her hand against the cool glass. The council had explained the new approach. Instead of formal first contact in a controlled station, they would spend several hours together in wilderness conditions. No weapons, no barriers, just 2 species trying to understand each other. The Rathki shuttle landed first, 100 meters from where the human transport touched down. Lyra watched through the viewport as Shunva emerged, followed by Nest Mother HFY. The ancient Rathki moved slowly. Her scales faded with age, but her bearing still proud. When the humans emerged into the warm afternoon air, Shunva was already waiting at the designated meeting point. He stood differently than before, Lyra noticed. Less rigid, though still alert. His sensory tendrils were extended, sampling the air. She remembered her training and kept her expression neutral. No smiles. Thank you for agreeing to this, Halter said formally. Shunva dipped his head slightly. Mediator Pollen suggested it would be educational for both our peoples. HFY stepped forward, her ancient eyes studying each human carefully. I am Nest Mother HFY. I have lived 300 cycles and seen many species. You're the first who have ever made our warriors freeze in fear. I wanted to understand why. We're still trying to understand that ourselves, Lyra admitted. The old Rathki made a rumbling sound that might have been a laugh. Honesty. Good. Perhaps we start with questions instead of assumptions. Dr. Moss, may I ask why you smiled at High Tracker Shunva during your first meeting? Lyra thought carefully about her answer. In human culture, smiling shows friendliness and welcome. When I saw your people for the first time, I was excited and happy. I wanted to communicate that I meant no harm, and was pleased to meet you. But you showed your teeth, HFY said quietly. You looked directly into my eyes. You moved forward. Yes, Lyra confirmed. Those are all ways humans show interest and engagement. Are they different for your species? Gida ansua. For the Wrath Key, showing teeth is a threat display. Direct eye contact signals dominance challenge. Forward movement indicates attack preparation. Combined, they create a pattern that our instincts recognize as danger. Understanding crashed over Lyra like cold water. Oh no, I accidentally gave you every signal that I was about to attack. Not just attack, HFY corrected. Every signal that you were a predator who ranked above me. My instincts identified you as Apex. But that's not what I meant at all, Lyra said, distressed. I'm a xenobiologist. I spend my life trying to understand and protect other species. I would never hurt you. Your intentions and your instinctive signals are two different things, HFY observed. Tell me, Dr. Moss, how did your species hunt on your homeworld? As they talked, they began walking along a path that led into the forest. It felt more natural than standing in one place, less confrontational. Lyra explained persistence hunting, the way humans could track prey for days without stopping. She described how early humans survived not through strength, but through stamina and adaptability. You didn't overpower your prey, HFY said slowly. You simply never stopped pursuing them. That's one way to look at it, Lyra agreed. But we also did something else. We formed partnerships. With prey species? HFY asked. Sometimes, Winters said, but also with other predators. The most famous example is dogs. They evolved from wolves, which were apex predators in their own right. But humans and wolves discovered they could hunt better together. Over thousands of years, wolves became dogs, and now they're humanity's closest companions. HFY stopped walking. You befriended other apex predators. Not just befriended, Lyra said enthusiastically, forgetting to be cautious. We made them family. There are billions of dogs living with humans. We feed them, protect them, care for them when they're sick. And they help us in return. It's partnership, not dominance. A sound in the underbrush made everyone stop. Through the trees, a creature emerged. It was roughly the size of a large dog, six-legged with iridescent scales and eyes that reflected the light. A ridge stalker, according to the briefing materials. Territorial and aggressive. The Wrath Key immediately shifted into defensive postures. HFY's sensory tendrils retracted slightly. HFY's hand moved toward where a weapon would normally hang. Don't move, Lyra said softly. Stay calm. Let it see we're not a threat. The ridge stalker watched them with intelligent eyes. It took a step closer, sniffing the air. Lyra remained perfectly still, her breathing steady. Winters and Halter followed her lead without question, their years of training helping them trust her expertise. The creature circled slowly, evaluating. 30 seconds passed. A minute. Then, apparently deciding they weren't worth the effort, the ridge stalker turned and padded back into the forest. How did you know it would leave? HFY asked. I didn't know for certain, Lyra admitted. But most predators don't want to fight unless they have to. Fighting costs energy and risks injury. If we showed we weren't threatening its territory and weren't easy prey, it had no reason to attack. HFY made that rumbling sound again. You understand predators because you think like them, not to dominate them, but to coexist with them. They continued walking, and the conversation flowed more easily now. HFY began to relax, his warrior training giving way to genuine curiosity. He asked about Earth's other predators, about how humans dealt with dangerous wildlife, about the evolution of human society. As the afternoon wore on, Lyra found herself actually enjoying the experience. Despite the rough start, despite the cultural misunderstandings, they were making progress. She was learning about Wrath Key pack dynamics, about their honor codes, about their complex relationship with strength and weakness. The sun was setting when they encountered the second predator. This one was much larger, much more dangerous, and it was hungry. The Night Ripper emerged from the shadows between trees like something out of ancient nightmares. 3 meters tall at the shoulder, its body covered in armored plates that clicked together as it moved. 6 eyes glowed with bioluminescent hunger, and its claws left gouges in the soil with each step. The creature's breath came in wet, rasping sounds that Shunvie's instincts screamed at him to fight or flee. This was a true apex predator of Zephyr 7, a creature that hunted by darkness and killed with mechanical efficiency. His muscles tensed, ready for combat even without weapons. "Nobody run," Captain Winters said, his voice steady despite the danger. "Back away slowly. Keep your movements small." The Night Ripper's 6 eyes tracked them, processing, calculating. It took a step forward, massive head lowering as it scented the air. Lyra could see the powerful muscles bunching beneath its armored hide. This creature was built to kill, and they had wandered into its hunting territory. "It's evaluating whether we're worth the energy expenditure," Lyra murmured, her voice barely audible. "Predators this size need lots of calories. It's deciding if we're prey or threat." Kivare stood perfectly still, her ancient warrior training overriding the urge to attack. She watched the humans carefully. They showed no panic, no aggression, just careful, controlled retreat. The Night Ripper moved closer, now only 10 meters away. Its breath washed over them, smelling of meat and earth. One of its eyes fixed on Halter, who stood at the edge of their loose group. The creature's head tilted, considering. "Spread out slightly," Lyra whispered. "Make us look bigger as a group. Not threatening, just not worth attacking." They moved with agonizing slowness, each person shifting a half step sideways. The group expanded from a tight cluster to a wider formation. The Night Ripper paused, its primitive brain recalculating. One target had become 6. The energy cost of attacking went up. Shunvie watched Lyra's face in the dim twilight. She was afraid. He could see that in the tightness around her eyes, the careful control of her breathing. But she wasn't panicking. She was thinking, analyzing, using her understanding of predator behavior to keep them all alive. The Night Ripper took another step. Then it did something unexpected. It lowered its head and made a low rumbling sound, almost questioning. "It's not sure," Lyra breathed. "We're confusing it." The creature circled slowly to the left, trying to get a different angle, a better view. As it moved, something changed in its posture. The aggressive tension faded slightly. Its eyes tracked them, but without the fixed focus of a committed attack. "Why is it hesitating?" "Because we're not acting like prey," Winters replied softly. "Prey runs or fights. We're doing neither." The standoff continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only 5 minutes. The Night Ripper made several false approaches, testing them, but each time the group held their formation, moving as one coordinated unit. Finally, with a huff of what might have been frustration, the creature turned away. It paced into the forest, and they heard its heavy footsteps fading into the distance. Nobody moved for another full minute. Then, collectively, they all released held breaths. "That," Shunvie said slowly, "was the most terrifying and fascinating thing I have ever witnessed." Lyra's legs were shaking, but she managed a weak smile. "Welcome to Earth Wildlife Management, Rathkey style." They made their way back to the monitoring camp as darkness fell completely. The council had prepared a fire pit with what already gathered, a concession to human preferences. As flames crackled to life, providing light and warmth, the two groups sat together with less tension than before. "I need to understand something," Shunvie said as they shared ration packs and dried meat. "You could have run. You could have scattered, made it harder for the Night Ripper to choose a target. Instead, you stood together." "Why?" "Because we're stronger as a group," Lyra explained. "Human evolution favored cooperation. A lone human is weak, but humans working together can take down prey much larger than themselves. We learned to trust our pack." "Pack," Kivare repeated the word thoughtfully. "You use that term deliberately?" "Yes," Winters said. "Military units are packs. Research teams are packs. Families are packs. Humans are social predators who survived by working together." Shunvie stared into the fire, processing this. The Rathki are also social, but our structure is different. We have strict hierarchies. Dominance determines everything. But you speak of cooperation without dominance. Not without leadership, Halter clarified. But leadership through competence and trust, not just strength. When that Night Ripper appeared, we all looked to Lyra because she's the xenobiologist. She had the relevant expertise. And when we needed tactical coordination, we followed Winters, Lyra added, because he has military training. Leadership shifts based on the situation. Kivare made a deep humming sound. You are pack predators who befriend other predators and avoid fights when possible. You bare your teeth in joy instead of threat. You lead through competence instead of dominance. She looked at Shinvie. Do you understand now why you froze when she smiled? Shimba nudda slowly. Because every instinct told me I was facing an apex predator, but not the kind that would kill me directly. The kind that would make me part of its pack, under its protection, whether I wanted to be or not. Is that really so terrible? Lyra asked softly, for a species built on dominance and pride. Shimba Rupia. To become subordinate, even to a benevolent superior, means losing our identity as apex predators. It means admitting we are not the top of the food chain. Or, Winters suggested carefully, it means recognizing that the food chain is a primitive concept. That intelligence allows us to move beyond simple predator and prey relationships. The fire crackled between them. Above, alien stars wheeled across an unfamiliar sky. Two species separated by evolution and culture sat together in the darkness and tried to build a bridge across the gap. The council will ask me for a recommendation, Shinvie said finally, about whether humanity should be accepted as members. I thought I knew my answer after our first meeting, but now I am uncertain. What changed? Halter asked. Shinvie met Lyra's eyes across the fire. This time he didn't flinch. You did. All of you. You showed me that being apex is not about dominance. It's about understanding. And perhaps that is more frightening than any threat display could ever be. The council chamber held representatives from 200 worlds, a space so vast that the far walls disappeared into atmospheric haze. Holographic projections carried the images of those who could not attend physically, floating like ghosts among the assembled delegates. The air hummed with a dozen different atmospheric preferences blending together. Lyra sat in the human delegation area, wearing formal clothing that felt too tight after days in field gear. Beside her, Halter reviewed his notes one final time, and Winters sat with military stillness. They could observe but not speak. Not yet. Not until humanity was accepted as full members. Across the chamber, Shinvie stood in the Rathki section, his scales polished, his bearing proud. But Lyra could see something different in his posture now. Less rigid, more thoughtful. Kivare sat behind him, her ancient presence a steadying force. Mediator Pollen called the session to order, his 6 eyes sweeping across the assembled multitude. We gather to decide the petition of humanity for provisional membership in the Galactic Council. The matter is complex and has raised questions about the nature of predation, dominance, and cooperation in civilized space. The chamber's massive display screens lit up, showing footage from the past week. Lyra watched herself smile at Shinvie in that first meeting, watched the Rathki freeze in terror. She winced. It was worse seeing it from the outside. The initial contact resulted in an unprecedented response. Pollen continued. For the first time in recorded history, Rathki warriors experienced fear in a diplomatic setting. This raised immediate concerns about human classification. A Vorn delegate stood, his armored carapace gleaming. The Vorn were themselves predators, though less feared than the Rathki. What we witnessed proves that humans are apex predators who weaponize their very presence. They should be classified as a threat and quarantined to their home system. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the predator delegations. Lyra felt her heart sink. After everything, after the progress they had made, would it end here? But Shinvie stood, and the chamber fell silent. As a high tracker of the Rathki, his voice carried weight. I request permission to address the council. Granted, Pollen said. Shenvier stepped forward to the central speaking platform. I was the warrior who froze. I am the one who felt terror when Dr. Moss smiled. And I am here to tell you that everything we think we understand about this situation is incomplete. He gestured to the screens, where footage now showed their time in the wilderness. Yes, the humans triggered my fear response, but not because they threatened violence. They triggered it because they represented something my instincts recognized but my mind could not comprehend. They are predators who evolved beyond predation. That makes no sense, the Vorn delegate interrupted. It makes perfect sense, Kivare said, rising from her seat. At 300 cycles, she commanded respect even from other species. The Vorn delegate speaks of weaponizing presence. But what we witnessed was not weaponization. It was evolution. Humans developed the tools of apex predators, the confident eye contact, the forward movement, the showing of teeth. But they used these tools for connection, not conquest. She activated a new display, showing human historical data. They domesticated wolves, turning fierce predators into loyal companions. They formed partnerships with hundreds of species. They survived not by being the strongest, but by being the most adaptable and cooperative. Their strength comes from unity, not dominance. That is their danger, a Skeltar representative argued. They will dissolve the natural order. Predator and prey species exist in balance. Humans disrupt that balance. The balance you describe as fear came a new voice. A Brevin delegate, an herbivorous species, stood. We herbivores join the council knowing we are subordinate to predator species. We accept limited rights because we fear what happens if we do not. You call this balance. I call it oppression disguised as natural order. The chamber erupted in argument. Herbivore delegates voiced agreement with the Brevin, while predator species defended the existing structure. Lyra watched the chaos and understood that her smile had done more than frighten one warrior. It had cracked open a fundamental debate about how galactic society functioned. Pollen called for order, his voice amplified to override the noise. We will now hear from High Tracker Shenvier, who has prepared a formal recommendation. Shenvier returned to the platform. I recommend that humanity be accepted as provisional members of the council. The chamber exploded again, but he continued speaking over the noise. Not because they are harmless. They are not. Not because they are weak. They are anything but. I recommend their acceptance because they represent an evolution in thinking that we desperately need. He looked directly at the human delegation. Dr. Moss, when you smiled at me, you show me something my species has forgotten. That strength without understanding is just violence. That dominance without cooperation is just tyranny. You terrified me because you offered partnership as an equal, and my species has no framework for that concept. We have frameworks, the Vorn delegate protested. Treaties, alliances, trade agreements. All built on hierarchies of power, Kivare responded. Humans offer something different. True cooperation. And yes, that is dangerous to the old order. But perhaps the old order deserves to be challenged. The vote was called. Green light for acceptance, red for rejection, yellow for abstention. Lyra held her breath as the chamber filled with color. The herbivorous species voted overwhelmingly green. The predator bloc split, with more red lights than green. But then the Rathke delegation voted, and their light shone green. That single vote shifted the calculation. If the Rathke, the most feared predators in the council, accepted humanity, what excuse did other predator species have? Slowly, reluctantly, some red lights changed to yellow, some yellow to green. When the count finished, humanity had won by a narrow margin. Provisional membership, subject to review in 5 years. It wasn't a full victory, but it was a beginning. Halter stood and bowed formally to the council. On behalf of humanity, we accept this provisional membership with gratitude and humility. We understand the concerns raised today, and we pledge to work toward building trust with all species. Afterward, in a private meeting room, the human and Rathke delegations met one final time. Lia Pruaka, Shimba Karafuli. Thank you for speaking on our behalf. I know it wasn't easy. It was necessary, he replied. You asked me once why your smile terrified me. I can answer that now. It terrified me because it was genuine. You showed teeth not as threat, but as joy, looked me in the eyes not to dominate, but to connect, moved forward not to attack, but to understand. Everything about you said apex predator, but none of it was meant as dominance. That contradiction broke my understanding of the universe. And now, Lyra asked. Shinvier was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, carefully, he pulled his lips back slightly, showing his teeth in an awkward approximation of a smile. Now I am learning that the universe is larger than my understanding. And perhaps that is not something to fear. Lyra smiled back, genuine and warm. And this time Shinvier did not freeze. Growth, she thought, came not from dominance, but from the willingness to change. Both species had taken a step into unknown territory. Where that path led, none of them could say. But they would walk it together, and that made all the difference.